introduce our resource person, Dr. Anand Bhairappa sir. Dr. Ananda Bhairappa sir has a PhD in information science. He has done his information and knowledge management course from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He is a GE certified Six Sigma black belt. Anand sir has spent over 20 years in top multinational corporates. He has experience in leading global operations in various areas of covering digital libraries, business information services, corporate communications, research services, and knowledge management. He has served at Dutch Bank Group, Z Media Group, and General Electric. Anand sir has joined Indian Institute of Science in the year 2017, and he is currently heading the JRD Tata Memorial Library at Indian Institute of Science. Sir has co-edited a book and 5 conference volumes. He has also written 4 book chapters and published several articles in national and international conferences and journals. He has been invited for many national and international conferences, and he has delivered invited lectures, plenary talks, and chaired technical sessions and panel discussions. Anand sir has served on Scopus Content Selection and Advisory Board. He is a recipient of Global Knowledge Management Leadership Award. He has also been honored by listing his name in the 50 most influential knowledge management professionals. Even Government of Karnataka has honored him with the Best Librarian Award. He is a winner of Vikram Sarabhai Operational Excellence Award. Sir's area of interest include knowledge management, digital libraries, Six Sigma, intellectual property, scholarly content, and publishing. With this brief introduction about him, I request Sir to handle a session on new education policy, digital platforms, and services for learning and teaching. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, please allow me a minute or two to share my screen. I hope I have enough rights to share my screen.
You can share, sir.
Yeah, I'm opening. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, visible, sir.
Okay. So thank you for a nice introduction. It was a very fascinating to listen to Dr. Siddamalaya, and he is one of the best known people for explaining conceptual things, and we saw that. So now coming back to my talk, my topic is a new education policy in context of digital teaching and learning. So pandemic has brought in a lot of negative things, bad things, and a lot of trouble to all of us. And at the same time, it has brought in something which is really, positive, I would say, that is shifting institutions and students and all of them from classroom-based, teaching and learning to the digital teaching and learning. In fact, NEP was supposed to drive digital learning, digital teaching, all of that, maybe starting from this year, I guess, because we have seen announcements from both state and central governments that a new education policy will be operational and implemented from this academic year. But however, as I said, pandemic has done one good thing, in my opinion, that is driving all of us to really go and adapt and use the digital modes of teaching, learning, and all of that. So we have seen many institutions, both at school level to university level, that all students are really moved from classroom learning to the digital learning, and teachers have really started using all digital platforms. So I thought in this context, it's good to really bring in or think about NEP and the kind of force it does or opportunity it gives both for teachers, institutions, and students in terms of digital training and learning opportunities. So my presentation plan here to address those things is very quickly we look at NEP. So we look at NEP in context of digital learning and digital platforms. I don't look at NEP holistically because I look at and pick up some points where there is a mention about digital learning and digital, teaching. And then we'll also look at the current education system, how the current education system is, and what is going to change, or is it already changed? And then we also look at digital content for teaching and training. What are the digital content available? What is changing and what is going to change significantly? We look at that as well. Then I'll also show a couple of initiatives happening both at India level, at a global level from digital teaching and learning point of view. Government of India is spending a lot of money in developing some digital tools and technologies and platforms. We'll have a quick look at that. And there is a private sector who is betting a lot of things on new educational system. And so we look at all of that as some examples I'll show you. And one or two, we had some experiments at IISc. I can share that as well. So at the end, we'll have some thoughts on conclusion. So that's broadly what I have. And let's move on to NEP. As I said, many of the faculty members and teachers, all of you, you know NEP, and you might have read that NEP document and all. So from my topic point of view, from digital teaching and learning point of view, points I would like to really bring to your notice. So for example, with the implementation of the new education policy, I think it's coming after 35 years. The earlier, change or modification happened in the education system was about 35 years back when Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister, and he was the one who renamed Ministry of Education to Ministry of Human Resource and MHRD. And now with this new policy, the nomenclature has come back from MHRD to Ministry of Education. So now the policy has option to really bring in and allow foreign universities to India. That will bring in a lot of change in the context of global competition, rankings and all. It's good to see foreigners coming here and competing with our established institutions. And if you look at that positively, that will also give a lot of learnings and inspirations and all of that for our Indian universities to really look at them, learn them, and scale up to that level. And why I'm saying that is, for example, whatever we try our best, and the systems are, we don't really have best universities in terms of ranking and performance in top 50. So though we have some universities which are reputed and we're doing, we have a lot of ground to really move on. The second point, what a new education policy will bring in is, since it's driving new things, it'll really end the era of UGC and AICTE, and very soon they're going to really wrap up. Of course, they may come in a very different ways. So that's it'll end both UGC and AICTE. We also know that the new division, the new sector will come in to drive whatever UGC and AICTE was doing. And the other big change which brings in is the 4 years degree and opportunity to choose multiple subjects. For example, now if you look at Indian education system, the accreditation of our degrees in international scenario, particularly in Europe and the US, is not easy because most of them expect the degree to be having 4 years duration. But however, so far we have, except engineering and medicine, all other degrees are really 3 years degrees. I think the new education policy is going to set right that. It will make it 4 years degree. And at the same time, they have come out with a very, very student-friendly kind of a policy. For example, that 4-year degree, once you join to 4-year degree, you all know by now that even if you discontinue at different stages, you still get something out of it. It's not like earlier system, like until you complete all 3 years, write final exam, you don't get degree certificate. Here in the new system, what happens is, first year, if you complete and leave for some reasons, if you can't really get into second year, you get a certificate course. And second year, I think diploma, third year, something like that. So for each year, there is some kind of a certificate, a recognition for student if they really have a difficulty in continue the education. That is there. The second biggest disadvantage I like in this system is the multidisciplinary subject approach. Say, for example, today, our graduation system, you look at only, BSc, only science subjects you take. Commerce, if you take only commerce, math, statistics related stuff. Arts will cover all of that. There is no really, opportunity to go multidisciplinary. So here, this new system will give you, for example, a science graduate can pick up a social science subject like economics, or the social science people can pick up some other additional subject like music and all kind of a thing. There's a lot of diversity, and which is really required. Make people to really explore whatever they would like to. For example, many of our students, we see that an engineering graduate will be doing lot of good music and all kind of a thing. He can pick up some subject like music, and he can study in that, and so it gives a lot of opportunities. That's very interesting from learning point of view. As I said, I picked up these 3 points which are really important from librarians point of view and also teachers point of view. Big changes. And here what NEP wants to really do is, the bigger objective of NEP in India is self-reliant India. That's a big thing. Can universities be self-reliant in terms of everything? Teaching, learning, materials, revenue generation and all of that. That's a big thing. And since foreign universities are really coming, and they don't come unless they really see some way to really generate revenue and survive, sustain and make profit. So with that, we should also be able to learn how we can really self-sustain, self-reliant and do all of that. Then focus on sustainability, something similar to that. Then education as an economy booster. That's interesting. So then that's where, foreign universities will come in, and education will become economy booster, and people can choose what subject they want. People have flexibility to choose the university they want to study. And that should really, boost the economy. That's the government expectation. And last 2 points which are highlighted are really related to the digital platform and the digital learning aspects, I would like to say. So digitized pedagogy and classrooms, NEP is going to drive these 2 things for teaching and learning. I mean, they drive, these are the 2 important things. And then equipping teachers with latest technology and education methodology. So there is a lot of focus on this. These 2 points will really bring in definitely new projects, new ways of doing things and all. I think there is also innovation fund and also related organization proposed by NEP. And through that, we are going to really develop a lot of content, develop a lot of tools in supporting what Government of India is really supporting and giving new content and new methodologies, new tools to our teachers and all. This is where all our faculty and libraries can play important role. Now we are in the threshold of moving from classroom-based education system to digital, and very soon, it's going to be very, very transformative. In the sense, you need a lot more tools, you need a lot more methods, you need a lot more training to teachers particularly. And students, the way I look at students is, the younger generation students are always, digitally savvy, and they very quickly pick up things and all. But we as educators, as a teacher, as a library, as an institution, we need to really scale up with a lot of things, not necessarily, using and promoting new tools and content. And also there is a need for developing content for classrooms. And also there is a need for really, looking at platforms, not only for teaching and learning and also for evaluation. There is no single tool like that now people are using. Of course, at IISc, we use Microsoft Teams tool to a certain extent now, but it comes with a lot of, hiccups and all kind of a thing. So that's going to really happen. So in my opinion, new education policy will bring in a lot of new opportunities for teachers to really pick up new projects and do something You will get enough funds and all of that as long as you have good ideas and all. So let's watch out for that. Both librarians, teachers, and institutions can really think of in these points where NEP is going to drive. And I'm sure there will be a lot of projects and opportunities to funding opportunities from institutions both in India and abroad. So that's basically about NEP I wanted to bring in context of my. Now, let's move on to the current education system. If you look at current education system, to look at it from a layman's point of view, education system will have three components. One is students, second is resources to teach and learn, and the third is the technology and the services, teaching and all of that. They all are interlinked. And if you look at, this is fundamentally true. This was the fact maybe 100 years back, and this is the fact today, and it will remain to be same. But what is really changing is ingredients or characteristics of each component of this system is changing significantly. For example, if you look at students, if you compare our generation when we were in college and all, we were not digitally savvy. There were only two options for us to really learn new thing. One is either you go to library, pick up a new book or a new journal, study and learn new thing, or go to classroom, sit and listen to teacher. That's where you get to know new things. So these are the broadly only two components. But today, students are very different. They are really, digitally savvy, new generation, born in digital era, and they always have a smartphone. That smartphone is, connected to net will have a lot of internet resources. Now students, before they come to class, probably they know much more than what is prescribed in the syllabus, or probably sometimes what teacher may not know. He may know something before he comes to the class. So that's the kind of a generation you're dealing with. I think that will be very interesting. And even if you don't know your subject, if you don't teach all the things what they need or what is really happening, they may really get disconnected with your class. So you need to be very careful as a teacher that you get ready, go and be prepared to teach the new generation of students who are very different from the students 15 years back, 20 years back. So that has changed. So in this context, I think we need to really get ready and do all of that. Now resources, again, 15, 20 years back, if you look at resources, for example, even many libraries and teachers used to use only print resources. And today, the resources are digital mostly. And if you go and want to buy a book or a journal, you get to see a lot more platform-centric kind of a content than a single resource-centric kind of a content. And then, so it's a very interesting thing. And in the digital world, as a teacher, you need to know that, you don't own anything. Unlike in the print world, when you buy a book, you have a complete copyright with you, you read, you take photocopy, do whatever you want. Once your course is done, once your class is done, you had an option to sell off that book and take some money in the used bookshop. But today, the rights have changed, everything has changed. You need to be very careful about that. Copyright, will remain with the seller most probably. And then DRM is really reality. What I meant by DRM is digital rights management. Most of the content which is coming to academic as well is DRMized. All major publishers like Elsevier, Wiley, IEEE, even societies like ACS, IEEE, and all of that, they have really implemented DRM. But however, they may not really, drive it at institution level now, because there is a DRM implementation at the site level, but they are making content DRM free for time being to encourage students and faculty to use that. But we should know, as a faculty, as a student, as a researcher, as a librarian, that you need to be very, very careful when you really drive e-content in institutions. And wherever it goes, whoever downloads, whatever people do, everything is being tracked by using DRM by publishers. In fact, in IISc, we get at least 1 or 2 instances every year, writing publishers to us saying that, for example, this website was misused. Somebody tried to download systematically in a bulk thing. So we are blocking your site. Then I had to go write to them, sorry, we'll figure out that, you enable access. Then we go back to students and teachers, tell them that, don't do that. What happens is, in a digital environment, when you get a new students, when they look at the content, particularly very prestigious content like, nature, science and all, they are tempted to really download from volume and issue one as if they don't get that tomorrow. So we shouldn't be doing that. I think it's important to really realize all of that. In the new education context, it's really very important. I mean, the whole, scenario of teaching, learning, and running libraries will change significantly. If you don't change and you become vulnerable and you expose not only yourself and also to your institute and your faculty, and also you should be very, very careful. That's a new thing. And here, teaching, learning, students' expectation is very different today. And probably if you go and teach the subject you are teaching, many of us who work in universities, I have observed at least majority of them, a teacher will have a specialization that will give him a, opportunity to teach one single subject for years, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We have also seen, unfortunately, some teachers not updating that. Even notes will become white color to yellow color. They still will be teaching all of that. You don't get appreciated by students. They may not tell you on your face, but they don't really rely on the content you use and the teachings you do. What they need is, they need really state-of-the-art content. You need to really connect with ongoing things, and they need speed, and they need a lot more value addition when you teach, because the younger generation is really exposed to the new age tools. For example, if you go to Amazon, for example, you know what are the value additions you get. Even if you go to all other online websites, you get a lot of things. So people are really, the generation you're going to teach and the generation we're going to handle going onwards is completely digitally exposed. And the expectations are really different. I feel there is a big gap in teaching community and libraries to really scale up and really go up to the students' expectations level. That's going to be a continuous process. So in my opinion, students are always ahead compared to the institutions' content, skills, and the teachers' teaching methods. I think everything should be modernized, and we should really scale up if you want to really, get good reputation from students. So in summary, what is today's fact compared to 10 years, 15 years back is, today every individual, irrespective of type, whether a student, a undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate, a research scholar, everyone has developed a digital habit, in the sense they prefer mode of knowing new thing, learning something new is in a digital way. We have seen all our smartphones. Even if you get 5 minutes time, we pick up, open the WhatsApp groups, look at what's new and all, or we go to some news websites like BBC News and all. We keep looking at all of that. So we have a digital habits. And, smartly, some very successful universities, particularly private universities and all, they have really understood these digital habits, and they're really driving the learnings in an effective way by understanding the digital habit. They are giving value-added services. For example, in this country, universities, when they struggle to make money to give salaries and all kind of a thing, private institutions like, if you look at these Allen and Byju's and all, they are, $1 billion companies now. See how they make money and how they attract, new students, and how they really scaled up the content creation in the digital format, making it interactive, making it value added. And in spite of having great schools, great academic institutions, they make billions of dollars, and that's happening. And we don't mind paying 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs for a student to learn in those schools. And the way they do is they make you learn in a contemporary way. You get you get an iPad, you get a customized app, everything is updated, everything is linked, and your parents are connected with that, and so digitally connected. I think the government sector and the higher education system, there's a lot of things to learn from those things and really scale up. I think NEP and implementation of that will expose all of us. We will not have any option but to really do scaling up. So that's my opinion. And so I also want to give you another context. We talked about why we need to scale up. Now, if you step back and look at the civilization, globalization and all. So for example, some time back, steam, power and electricity. So all these things provided a real boost, real ingredients for industrial revolution. So we all really, for industrial revolution, these were the things, which we needed. Today, if you really look at that and compare these industrial revolution with those ingredients, social media has really given a boost for a digital revolution and digital platforms by pushing SMAC. What I mean by SMAC is social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Now, if you look at these four areas, and companies and people and organizations, whoever has managed this SMAC effectively, they have become real successful. For example, you take the transportation companies like Uber, Ola. They're nothing but they're successful managers of SMAC. They have socialized the whole concept of getting a taxi. They make it mobile, and you book from wherever you want. There's a lot of analytics. They know when, what are your previous rates, what you expect, whether you want to have a mini car or a luxury car, whatever is that, they propose accordingly. And then cloud, everything is cloud based kind of a thing. Similarly, and these the examples of education institutions what I gave, for example, all these Byju's, Allen, and all these institutions, for example, Narayana and all those new age schools, they use this effectively, so effective that you would never feel that you are disconnected from school. And I believe one of my friends son joined one of these new age schools, Narayana. They have an app, and there are 5,000 people working just for that app, educational app for one group of institutions. That is the amount of importance they give, and that is the level of exploitation of technology they use. So if you don't know how to use technologies in the digital age, probably you are not there. So you need to really look at that. In government, we do a lot of things, but it takes a lot of time. And by the time we develop something, the growth will be something else. So we need to be really careful. Why? I was always wondering, when you have IITs, IISc, bigger schools, very good government schools, why is these private schools are really making so much of success? So these are the reasons why they make so much of success. And so I was really mesmerized. I think NEP will drive all these things. I think we need to really learn all these things. And these are some advantages proven by socializing, getting mobile, doing analytics and cloud and all. I just wanted to bring into your connection. Now, if you think, who bothers about social mobile and all, I teach physics fundamentals are same, everything is same, I continue to do that anyway, syllabus will not change, once in 10 years it will change. There will be some thoughts like that in some old school thought teachers. But I'll give you an example saying that if you look at Encyclopedia Britannica, we know that it's one of the legendary resources known for quality, reputation, and all kind of a thing. It got established in 1700s. It had about 65,000 articles. It was getting published in one language, that's English. And usually update was coming in annual basis. And somebody had studied, I have that data. In fact, those articles are there in Nature. The Encyclopedia Britannica, though it was very reputed and very well known, well respected. In fact, Nobel laureates had written papers in Britannica volumes, and it had got still about 2.5 articles per paper as mistakes or errors. So it's quite possible. Then Britannica was selling around $750. Now we know that Britannica stopped it, and it's no more publishing print, and it closed its print this thing division and all. The reason for that is the digital revolution. The SMAC, the way influenced. For example, Wikipedia came out from Jimmy Wales. Meeting him in one of the London online conference, he started along with one more person in one of the universities by taking a free server, and he democratized the whole process of creating content by using SMAC, socializing mobile, making it mobile, and doing some analysis and making it cloud-based. He requested people. He made it, as I said, democratization. You write an article, but your article is open for review. Any other person can come with references, with evidence, he can rewrite all those things. That model became very, very successful, and it became disrupting to Encyclopedia Britannica. So, for example, very quickly, though they started at 2001, very quickly, this is a little old data. There were over 55 lakhs articles, and Britannica is getting published in 270 plus articles. And so they are really real time. It's like, as it is on the digital platform, the democratization option is open, and you can really have an updation on real time. And look at the quality aspect. The point I'm driving here is 3.86. Now, if you look at Wikipedia with 55 lakh articles, and the Britannica, which has only 65,000, I think 3 errors per article is definitely, acceptable in my opinion. You have no reason to crib that, Wikipedia is of not high quality. So my point here is, if you don't really adapt technology, if you get disrupted. You need to be very careful, both as an individual, as an institution, or as a department. So you need to be really, really technology savvy, digital, because your customers, your students are really digitally savvy. And this generation students, if you want to really address, you need to be in the forefront of technology. Otherwise, you'll miss the link, right link with the students. So that's what is proven. And many private universities are very, very successful because they have realized these things. And I gave you some examples. So this is what I wanted to really bring into your notice. And we need to really be alert and do all of that. And take younger faculty members who are digital savvy, drive them, get them connected to students, and make your institution, make your faculty, make your department very different from rest of the institutions. I think that's the way to go with an EP coming in. Now, for example, I also wanted to tell you very quickly. So you look at as a teacher, as a student, as a faculty, you keep really looking at, are dealing with content. Every day you take a book, you take something. And also I wanted to give you an idea when the digital rights are really, how digital rights are embedded in content, digital content. When do they become really, monetized, or when do they become, protected? So very quickly, I'll take just 2 minutes to update. For example, if you look at content can be in any format. For example, it can be in the form of book, it can be in the form of audio, it can be in the form of, videos, and microfilm, microfiche. Actually, microfilm is really even now today very relevant, because even movies and all, the content of movie content is not stored in CD or, video and all. They are stored in microfilm, because microfilm is considered as the most reliable and long-term storage medium even today. So that's not very outdated kind of a thing. So this is the type of content we get, right? Once you get this content, what happens is, all this content now, what is happening is, we package it, we protect it, we license it. For example, how the protection or a packaging or, licensing happens is, it happens by one of these 4 methods. And one more called Creative Commons that I have not mentioned here. For example, use license agreement. When you buy a journal, when you buy a set of journals to your institution, you protect it, you control it, and you monitor it by signing license agreement with publishers. And DRM, as I said, DRM is a piece of software which can be applied to any kind of a digital content, and it will protect your content. The way it protects is, the moment you try to access the DRMized content, it will pop up for ID and passwords. That way you're protected. So DRM has a dual, views. For example, you as a user of the content, as a student, as a research scholar, you may not like it because content is protected. However, if you are a generator of the content, for example, if you are a faculty or a professor writing a book, and if you want to sell that book on online platforms like Amazon, Flipkart, then if you DRMize that book, it will help you to really protect your content and also track the selling and all kind of a thing. So whether you like it or not, it's a reality, and everybody is using DRM. As I said, Amazon, Flipkart, whatever you content you buy from there, they're all DRMs. That's what they're protecting. And then watermark. Watermark is not a technology, but it's a marking kind of a thing. At least it will help you where it went, who created that document kind of a thing. And then copyright. Copyright, it takes a lot of time to explain, but very briefly, the moment you create a book or a photograph, whatever is that, if you have a proof that you have created, you have a copyright. And all others, whether individual, institution, or whatever is that, they should take a written permission from the creator of the content, because the copyright belongs to the creator of the content. That's author generally, or sometimes publisher. So this is how the content, the moment you create content today, every piece of content getting created is getting packaged, protected, and licensed by using one of these things. And you need to be very, very careful about that. And then e-content, platforms. People today, they are not expecting to use the content, your ebook or whatever is that, in just by one medium. They may want to look at that as an audio, they want to read your book by in Kindle, in phone, and in laptop, and all of that. So this is how today's users' content is, getting created, it's getting protected, and how the digitalization is happening. And in education system, it's going to be reality going forward. In fact, why I'm telling this is some major institutions in India are already, experiencing more digital content than less digital content. For example, I can give you example of IISc and also first gen IITs in India. For example, if you look at IISc, we spend about 18, 19 crores per year for just library to buy content. In that, last year we spent only 1 crore for books. That too, 50 to 60 lakhs we spent on ebooks and 30 to 40 lakhs on print books. Everything else we spent on digital content in terms of journals, databases, and all of that. I think that is true with the first generation IITs as well. So some institutions have already transformed from print to electronic, digital. And unfortunately, libraries, institutions, and all not really come out with the value-added services to help faculty and students to exploit that content. We're in the process of reinventing all of that. Old school thought, current awareness service, document delivery service, all those things are really dated methods. We need to really come out with some value-added services linked to the digital habit of the students and faculty, and then see if we can really drive more usage and more value addition. So that's going to be a big thing going forward, and NEP is going to really drive that big time. Now, to tell you that whatever I explained earlier is a reality. For example, if you look at your the cable TV system you have at home, whether you have a Videocon, Airtel, whatever is that, all the channels are content. They come in the content. Every channel is protected by a security. You can't get unpaid content, because it will tell you saying that send message to this and buy that content. And then here you can buy that channel rights by paying some 40 rupees, 50 rupees, whatever is that. And most of us, we have experienced during cricket and saying that if a Star Sports is not accessible for us, we immediately pay, and within a few seconds you get the channel live, and you can use that channel wherever you want. If you have mobile, you can use by mobile in that channel. You can use your computer, you can use your PC, your TV, and all of that. This is exactly the digitization happened already, and it's going to happen in libraries and institutions as well. It's not going to be very different. And as I said, Amazon, IHS, and all these people are really driving this. So point here is, as a teacher, you should scale up to exploit and learn to use this digital content. As a researcher, you should know the rights and how to really get that. As a librarian, you should know how to really build this kind of a thing and make it very comfortable for you and your team to really drive digital content at institution level. Now, I also tell you very quickly, in the digital world, we drive at IISc 4-layer model. And as I said, at IISc at this point of time, 99% of our spend and content is in digital format. But from the research point of view, the way we have positioned our library is a 4-layer model. First layer is, we believe that research should begin by searching and abstracting indexing databases. For example, we have Scopus, we have Compendex, we have MathSci, and all of that, SciFinder, all those things. And we tell our students and researchers to really begin your literature search and all by using these databases. Once you do the literature search, then you can go to the second layer, that's the journals. You can pick up journals from multiple publishers. If you are a science guy, you go to SciFinder. You go to ACS, you go to Elsevier, Wiley, and all of that. Pick up 15, 20 journals. I don't think you need more than that. And that's a pick and choose kind of a thing. So you can get that. Excuse me. Then third layer is aggregator. For example, first two layers will address the core content needs of researchers and faculty needs. But third one is, for example, though you are in a science institutes or engineering institute, sometimes you may need a business magazine. For example, you may want to pick up Harvard Business Review, things like that. Or you may need some technical standards, or you may need some magazines. So there are a lot of aggregators, who really bring in that value addition. For example, they have EBSCO kind of a aggregator that brings in, Harvard HBR, Volume 1, Issue 1. You can look at that and you can drive all those things. And the very, very important is we need to really link all these three layers into one final layer. That is, that's your link resolvers, your discovery, and all of that. So we need to really do that. So unless you really create the top layer, the penetration, the usage of these four, bottom three links will not be that effective. For example, if you have a discovery, when you search on discovery for some content, if discovery can pull out some journals with a hypertext link to all those journals and databases, end user will have a seamless and time-saving kind of access to content. I think we need to really do that. This is a model we're really following. I think every library should follow. If you really put it in this way, and if you really, create awareness and promote it, I don't think people will go to Google, and people will come and get here what they want to really, because you have a carefully selected content, spending crores of rupees, and the content you have is exclusively for the kind of research your institution is doing, the kind of teaching your institution is doing. That way you are searching in very relevant content, and you have value-added services. On top of it, you are really bringing the interlinking of all of that by adding search, discovery, link resolvers, and all of that. And so in the value-added services, we are also starting now Grammarly, plagiarism tools, and all of that. They're all come under aggregator kind of a thing. Sometimes you need to do that. So that's the kind of a quick thing I wanted to give you, how you can really modernize or position your library in the next level to face the digital needs of new age students, and also NEP changing education system. Now, what I do is I'll show you some tools and platforms at the national and international level, which are really fitting into these kind of a learning and teaching scenario. The first one I would like to take is, this is the ePrints at IISc. This is a public, and ePrints at iisc.ac.in is the website. And this is the repository of all the publications of IISc. And we have about 50,000 scholarly articles stored in this. But however, not all articles are really public. About 20% of our database articles which are in our database are accessible to everybody. The others are either will be an embargo, or we don't have a copyright to really host publicly. But however, 20% of 50,000 is almost 10,000 articles, which is not a small content. And on top of it, in case if you use ePrints, in case if you need any article which you don't see full text accessible, you can always write to us, dds@iisc.ac.in. We support that, and we have always supported that. So this is one of the open educational material. It can be one of the open educational material available publicly, and you can use in any which way, irrespective of the institute you come from. This is an example. And the second OEM example, which is developed in India, is National Digital Library. A few years back, and the government of India spent more than 250 crores for this to develop. IIT Kharagpur is behind this, and they have put in a lot of time and effort to really do. And they are also hosting a lot of useful content, particularly textbooks from educational institution boards like NCERT, CBSE, and all of that. So I think this is another classic example teachers and institutions can use as open educational material source for teaching and learning and all of that. And also you need to observe the content, the way they have organized, the way they are really putting content and all of that. Now, National Digital Library is also driving the clubs, NDL clubs, National Digital Library clubs. If any of your institution is really willing to take that club membership kind of a thing, and you can contact them, they give you opportunity, and that will give you some support from them, and also you get an opportunity to use that more effectively, and you can create awareness as well. So Government of India is really doing a lot of good things in terms of creating digital content and supporting the educational system in India. I think this is going to grow further with the implementation of ADP. Now, third example is Shodh Ganga. And many of you know that Shodh Ganga is a repository of theses and dissertations of Indian universities. And they have completed 3 lakhs copies, unique theses and dissertations in that. And you can go search, do download and all of that. It's a very big, resource tool, particularly for research guides and also people who want to really do research. And you can look at things. Some thesis may be of embargo, but it's a lot of content and you get to see that. If you want to really get a commercial one, similar to Shodh Ganga, you need to pay few $1,000s. That is, ProQuest and all you get. But this is good enough. You get a lot of, most of the IIT thesis dissertations also you get, NIT thesis dissertations also you get. A lot of content in this. I think you need to use that. I mean, we should explore, using it effectively, more creatively. For example, one of the thing I said in one of the, talks is when teacher goes to a classroom teaching to PG and PhD scholars, we always tell them to read this paper, that book and all kind of a thing. Why don't we really pick up 2-3 dissertation copies or a thesis copies from Shodh Ganga and tell them that, you look at this thesis, you look at this. This is a thesis good from, a topic point of view, a research point of view, a results point of view. Or this is a thesis which is really good for presentation point of view. And this is the thesis which really talks about latest technology. Like that, thesis can be used as a very effective, learning or inspiration tool by teachers to students. We should really do that. And also people should really create their own content repositories. For example, a teacher can make his content much more enjoyable and learnable by creating some, say, spend some time during your vacation, pull out some 30-40 thesis copies from Shodh Ganga, or link to them instead of downloading, link to those 30-40 thesis things and connect them and tell them and introduce them while you teach in the class. So that's how you're going to use these OEMs effectively when you're in the classrooms. And that will really help students and all, because NEP will bring in a lot of evaluation methods as well. The teachers will be evaluated by students, and students also will get a lot of checks and balances. So I think it will be very nice if we can figure out individually, creatively to use all this content which is happening. And there will be a, updation of the content almost on a daily basis. So that's a great thing Infliminity is doing. I think we should use that. That is another thing. And the other thing, I would like to OEM again at India level is Swayam. Swayam has a lot of learning modules, that, and you look at that and you see a lot of them. In fact, Swayam, Government of India is also promoting Swayam as a learning platform to replace one of your, what do you call that? You do 15 days course, which is mandatory to get promotions, and you can do the complete one course on online. I think Government of India has passed recently, I think last year, before last year, that option to practitioners and also teachers to really pick up a course complete on Swayam. Swayam has a lot of content. You can really look at that. Now, the other thing is, this is Indian Academy of Sciences. They publish a lot of journals here. It's right next to the IISc campus here. And on this platform, all the Indian Academy of Science journals are free and accessible. Bookmark it. If you are in a science and technology organization, I think your librarian should really link all these journals to their website and make them available to study and all. Whereas if you go to Springer or any other website, they are priced. That's very interesting, because the Indian Academy of Sciences, so they're hosting on free of cost. but they have a hybrid model to make money out of that as well. But on website, Indian Science Academy has published, whatever journals they publish, all of them are available from volume 1, issue 1, and they are of very high quality journals. I think we should really exploit them in whatever way we can exploit. So this is another open educational material you can really use in the classroom and also for students to learn. And this is, I wanted to bring, for example, if you look at ebooks, now I can tell you very quickly what IISc experience we did. Like all other universities and institutions, IISc also, we decided to really move from classroom-based teaching to digital, completely digital. Students were there in their respective, places, locations, but we all told them to really log in. We used Microsoft Teams login, and the teachers were supposed to really go and teach online. And it was the first time IISc faculty members were trying to teach all of them in online. And they were also a little, apprehensive. And we all had a conversations on how do we really equip the teachers to make the online learning more effective for students. And what our faculty did, first semester, they looked at the syllabus and they looked at all the books which are really, listed under the first semester. And they passed on what are the books they really need in the digital format. And we got about 500 books list from IISc faculty put together for all departments. And very interesting experience. Out of 500 books, we wanted to buy all of them and make them digitally accessible, both for our teachers and faculty, who are both for our students and faculty, and wanted to make it accessible, wherever they are. Now we got into the, exercise of getting those books. Out of 500, which are coming from very reputed publishers, believe me, about 50% of the books and 250 books were not even available in the digital format. It means the whole industry is not really, scaled up yet to the digital requirements. Reasons were different. Some of them, they want to make money in their print, selling by print textbooks, and there were so many reasons. But we could able to really identify about 200 plus books. We paid some 80 plus lakhs. We got digital rights for all the books. We provided links both on our OPAC and on publisher website and also on our departmental website. And teachers used all those books. So that's how you can really, use. But we also found some problems. For example, different publishers will come with different rights. Some publishers, when you buy books, online from them, they don't give you the rights the kind of rights you need. For example, I can tell you this openly. There is a publisher by name Pearson, and we had about 30-40 books listed under Pearson. We wanted to buy, pricing negotiated, everything was done, but we ended up canceling that order because their license agreement was one-sided. And there was a clause saying that if you want to use a paragraph or a sentence from a Pearson book in your institution, they expected us to write to them and take a written permission, which is impossible and impractical in an academic setup. So we told them to change your terms and conditions, and if you can make your agreement mutual and mutually beneficial, we can buy. And so you need to be very careful when you really buy. The meaning behind putting this slide is one of the society, the Cambridge University Press, is doing a major ebook project. They're coming out with most probably publisher independent ebook platform, wherein right now, both in India and the worldwide, there is no platform which is to host books which is publisher independent. Right now, the way you address book needs is, either you host them on the publisher website. Every time you search OPAC and it will be linked to a publisher website. And the reason is, though you get access to the full text and all, end user experience will be different when he visits different websites for ebooks alone. So you can drive uniform access and uniform rights and look and feel and all of that. You can also exercise rights very effectively. So that way, hopefully Cambridge University Press will come out with something very interesting. We're all watching out that. So right now, we're all looking for a platform which can really help us to host ebooks, which is publisher independent and which can be accessed. There are some experiments, but nothing full-fledged yet. So we hope to see that. I think that will help both students and also teachers, and most importantly, libraries to provide better access to your content and also maintain archives and all of that. Now, the other thing is, this is the one open educational platform called lens.org. It's a very interesting developed by one of the Australian university. And we did some trial access and experimentation and all. This is a platform. For example, a student, a faculty, a department, and even university can use this as a platform, not only to host the content of your licensed content and also public content. For example, you can host journals, you can host patents, you can host all of that. And you will also host your learning materials, everything. Student can make it as their learning platform kind of a thing. It's coming up. We looked at this. It's a very promising, very nice, and it's an open source one. So you can really see, explore, and if you can really, adapt it at the institute level, because at the initial level, you don't need to pay anything, and it's an open access kind of a thing. So there are a lot of developments are happening, and in my opinion, very soon, from 5 years from now, the way libraries handle content, the way teachers are going to use content, and students, everything will change if NEP is implemented and if we really make it 100%. Now, so this is another thing, digital. Now in India, InflipNet has started driving creation of profiles of faculty members, and many institutions are really, almost all centrally funded technical universities like CFTIs and universities have developed faculty profiles of their own institutions, and IISc also we have created. And if you come here, it's a publicly available. You don't need ID and password. You can go to IRNS website of IISc and you click on that. You can see profiles of all the faculty members by department, at institution level, and even at individual level. You can see how many publications they have published, and also see summary of their publications for last whatever number of years they have really done research. And at the end, there will be a DOI link to every article they have published. And DOI link, what it does is, if you really have subscription to that journal at the institution where you're trying to access that journal article, you will get seamless access. So that way, this will be a very big, open content access system for our students, because most of our faculty members' publications are published in international journals, and all of them have DOI links, and they can really go and access any article they want, full text. So at the end, if time permits, I'll show you a couple of minutes demo of these faculty profiles of IISc. And let me move on to the next one. Now, so in conclusion, NEP is on threshold. As I said, at least now, I thought at Karnataka level, Ashwath Narayan, who was the education minister earlier, had made an announcement that from this academic year, NEP will be implemented. I think the portfolios have not changed political point of view. So he remained to be the educational minister. I think that's a positive thing from NEP point of view. I hope he'll drive whatever he had promised, and NEP will be implemented. So it's not that we are talking something which is not implemented. It's going to be reality from this financial year. And digital training and learning is reality. As I mentioned, there are a lot of OEMs, and both at national level and international level, and a lot of them are coming up as well. And we need to really look at them both for teaching and also learning point of view. And then initiatives and innovations will be a new normal. I think in next 5 years, content transformation will happen big time, and teachers will have no option but to adapt digital resources and digital platforms to really teach and learn and make all of that. And educational materials, you get to see educational materials both developed by at in-house government level, and also commercial tools. I talked about commercial tools, and very soon they're going to, with foreign universities coming in, and some commercial tools may also come in, pitch in and they adapt. For example, I said at IIC, for teaching, learning, and all of that, we're using Microsoft Microsoft Teams, and which is a paid thing. And we see a lot of limitations in that, but still we get to really see that happening. And in my opinion, individual contributors and institutions and everybody should really scale up and do all of that. I think this is going to be a transformation period. Government is driving new policy, and digital technologies are really, raving up. And so we have no option but to really, move up. Now, in summary, what I think is, whether you like it or not, whether you agree or don't agree, technology is going to drive big time, and open educational materials, eventually they become total learning management systems. Today, what we saw, ePrints, DSpace, the thesis and dissertation, all of that, they are more or less a content repositories. That's it. You don't really have a great deal of analyzing, looking at, linking to classrooms and all of that. That scenario, in my opinion, will change significantly. Every OEM we have today, developed by both at India level and also private level, international level, they get a lot of value additions inbuilt into them, and they eventually become total learning management systems. So that is from the technology and platforms point of view. From content point of view, I gave you an example about Britannica, how qualitative it was, and also how reluctant they were in terms of adapting technology and moving ahead in the digital age. So going forward, the quality of the content we need, digital Britannica kind of a quality content we need, but we need agility of the Wikipedia. So that's the kind of a flexibility you need to create. Even at a classroom, when you create a syllabus, when you create a classroom presentation and all, you should really expose it for changes. You should really expose it for feedback. You should really keep changing your, presentations, what you use every time in a classroom. Every time you go and teach same subject to the same class or a next year class, the content should be very different and updated. And you have to do that. That is the only way to be a better teacher, and making teachers more respectful, and also students to learn new things. So that's broadly what I have. And by the time you prepare your questions, let me open up my IIC faculty profiles, and I'll show 2-3 minutes demo. So if you have questions, you can pick up questions. I mean, I can keep answering questions as well.
Sir, actually, we have received only one question from the participants.
Okay.
The question is it possible to map the citations of Scopus with the IRNS software?
It should be possible, but unfortunately, if you look at IRNS software, I know Kannan is doing a lot of good work, I know him, but I don't see any other value addition. It remains to be same tool since 3 years. But if you want to really map, I have another tool name, which is commercial, which is called SciVal, and you can map all of them. At IIC, we use that. I think in IRNS, there is a possibility to do, and as it is driven by InflipNet, and we need to really write to them to come out with some kind of a value addition. I think it's high time for them also to bring out some value adds in terms of IRNS. It remains to be, just profile making kind of a software. That's not good enough. The other thing which people are asking is, in addition to citations, can they also automatic alerts can they get by choosing one of that? So I think we should have some discussion with InflipNet and Kannan and see our feedback and constructively, and help them to really do a second phase development. But that's doable in my opinion. Did I answer the question?
Yes, sir. We have one more question. Hello, sir.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. What is the difference between SGR score and impact factor? This is something which is not relevant to your topic.
Yeah, absolutely not relevant. I'm not going to pick up that question because SJR, you have a website, you can go and see, you see the citations there. Impact factor, you know the definition.
Yes, sir. Sir, another person has asked, in the NEP, the role of OERS is not mentioned in school education.
Role of?
OERS, Open Education Repositories.
Okay.
In school
Okay,
education is not mentioned in the NEP. So could you please elaborate on this?
See, open educational material, you don't need to expect it to be mentioned. It's like, what resource or what book or a journal or a textbook you use for teaching. So my thought was why I brought in open, educational material, which are in digital format. When NEP is coming, when everything is more digital, I think, I also explained how students are really getting transformed from print-based learning to digital learning and how platforms are coming in terms of Byju's, these schools and all their own apps. Even I also gave an example of one of the private school like Narayan. I know they have an app developed and there are 5,000 people working to maintain that app and they use a lot of value added content and all. So the point is they might not have mentioned, but to make that learning effective and to be on par with other competitors, you need to really have it.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So let me link the ARNS profiles now. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Oh, visible, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the, if you go to the website, iiscprofiles.irns.ac.in, you see this website. And this is the website which will give publications of all IISc faculty. We have about total 530 plus faculty members here. That includes scientific officers and some superannuated faculty members as well. And this first one, if you really look at that, you see the overall publications of IISc and overall impact factor and all of that. And you can also browse the content by, faculty, by department and all of that. And you see the H index of each department of IISc as well. All of them are interactive. And so for example, you can also browse by department. For example, I take aerospace engineering. And if you go to aerospace engineering, the department chair can see the department performance. For example, this is the aerospace department. You can see how many their publications, how many of them are citations. This is the annual publications count of that aerospace department. And these are the faculty members who are currently working in aerospace department. And again, each one of them are really linked, and they're all connected. For example, if you come here and you browse these things, so you can really see individual profiles as well. For example, to take an example, let me give you an example of Professor Ghosh. If a student wants to see his profile, this is his profile. So he is the professor, he is at aerospace department, and these are his annual publications from day he joined IISc. And if you come down, you see his collaboration trend with whom he has collaborated, and you see all his Scopus ID, ARC ID, and all of them, their IDs. And you see his brief academic profile where he studied and how and his awards. And at the end, if you come back, you see all his 200 plus publications, which are hypertext linked, for example. So for example, recent, you can browse and you can, sort by either ascending or descending. And so we thought this is very, interesting and inspiring kind of a tool for students when they join. It's a nice way to know their faculty members, what is their background, how big they are. In fact, particularly at IISc, the kind of faculty we have, they are really world class, and they are very inspiring to our students. So that way students will get to see not only their academic details and all, and they get to see all their publications as well. As I said, if you scroll down, you see all their publications, and they're all DOI linked. For example, if you want to see this paper got published this year, I guess, yeah, 2021, and you click on that, it should open up the full text. So that way you don't need to really go do anywhere. Okay, this is asking for DOI thing. Probably we don't have subscription to it. You choose some other link to show you the full text thing. Oh, okay. I think some DOI issue is there. We need to really look at that. Okay. So that gives a seamless access to all the publications. It looks like there is some issue with the DOI. So I need to talk to them. So that's briefly what I had. I think I'm on time, 1 p.m. Thank you very much for your patience. I hope I brought in something which can be of use to you as a student and also as a faculty. And thanks for this opportunity. I would like to personally thank IR and Gowder for pressurizing me to accept this and do that. And also Kodan Ramu, who is always doing some very interesting programs. He's one of the very active young professionals. So it's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's our pleasure to have you in our program. The content that you have delivered to the faculty, research scholars, and students are very advantageous and worthwhile. So I would be very thankful to you for taking up such a wonderful session for our FTP. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Kodan Ram. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your patience. Bye.
Dear participants, I have already shared the feedback links on your WhatsApp group. Please fill the link and mark your attendance there only. And please do not ask for any feedback links or form in the chat box. Chat box is meant for only receiving the questions from your end. Please keep it in your mind. And I request you to be back at 2 o'clock for the third session. Thank you. I'll be